Okay, so welcome everyone to our webinar today on the Grow model. Thank you very much for joining us. And I know people are dialing in from various parts of the world. So thanks for taking some of the time from your day to be with us. And we hope to make this worth it for you. My name is Sam and I'm the Chief Development Officer at Transcend International. And I'll just spend the first couple of minutes just introducing you to our organization and the work that we do. I know I recognize a few names here that are already people that are familiar with the organization. So I'll just share my screen here very quickly. So you might have found us from our social media channels or newsletter or website, but just sharing our website again, transcend-international.com. And we're an organization, a global organization that provides programs and services for helping individuals, leaders and organization adapt and optimize in the world that we're living in today. And as most of you are experiencing, we live in very volatile, uncertain times, a lot of complexity, things that we cannot predict. So a lot of our programs and services are anchored to empower and equip individuals to be able to adapt to these challenges that we face today. A lot of our programs are anchored in coaching, but of course we use other modalities in coaching. There's team coaching, there's emotional intelligence, we have mindfulness-based approach. But all of our programs, the common thread in them is that they're evidence-based, they're based on scientific research, but also business and leadership development case studies. So, and you will see that reflected in the content that we have today. We provide these programs to the public in the form of public enrollment programs, specifically coach training, so professional coach trainings. And I'll show you a newsletter that we've sent out recently, and I'll send this link to you guys, where we've provided some information about our globally accredited coach training from the ICF and the EMCC, but also the upcoming dates for both our online coach trainings, but also our in-person coach trainings right now happening in Hong Kong, if they do happen, because of the complexities of COVID-19 right now, but we're adapting to that, and we've been doing so since the beginning of the year here in Hong Kong, and also a perfect time to be doing these trainings and expanding it online. So we also provide these trainings in an organizational context. So if this appeals to you and perhaps your team, do contact us. I will send kind of a link to our website, and you will find our contact us form here. So please be in touch. And from here, I'll hand over to my colleague, Craig McKenzie, who can get us started on the webinar for today. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Sam. I'll walk you through. Welcome here. I am Craig McKenzie. I'm one of the directors of this organization and co-founder, along with our chairman and CEO, Tony Dickel. So one of the main things that I do in the organization is I'm director of our academy and also director of the team coaching programs that we have. And I'll be taking you through this webinar tonight, and hopefully we'll get your interactions and connections in a moment. Sam's going to launch a poll in a few minutes, but here's a little bit just to see what Sam talked about us. Here's our focus. When it comes to coaching, one of the things that we've been reasonably not good at, I think, is really, and as coaches, we're not really good at this anyways, is this whole idea of just sort of promoting our abilities and our skills. And it's one of the challenges that those of you that choose to train as a coach will have to come to, that part of the product that we sell is ourselves, of course. So as an organization, we've been working in pioneers in coach education in this region, in the Hong Kong and Greater China region, and extended globally over the last 3 years. We do a tremendous amount of work with internal coaches. So that's training coaches within organizations, but also international experience training in organizations as well, and actually coaching. So we're practitioners, of course, and trained supervisors as well. So we have all this stuff that we do, and we're building that. And of course, what we really want is coaches who want to be a part of this really strong professional commitment, and definitely a transformational focus to what we do. So as Sam mentioned, we're accredited by the 2 leading organizations that accredit coaches around the world, the International Coach Federation and the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. And our coach training programs, whether internally delivered within an organization or for people that want to be accredited as coaches, they all can lead to accreditation, whether it's team coaching, coaching skills, or certificate in professional coaching. And here's some of the things that we do and some of the programs that we have coming up in the near future. So this is a little bit about me, and I'm happy to move past that slide relatively quickly. So you're here, but we don't know who you are. So Sam, is now a good time for you to run this poll. Here we go. So please, if you're attending, just choose the answer to the best description that describes you. So we'd love to just find out who you are, and then I can also tailor the presentation a little bit, or at least make sure that I connect with all people that are here. So it looks like about.
You see the poll that we launched? Maybe you can chat.
Yeah. Sorry. If you can't see it, chat.
But I'm not sure if the attendees can see it.
The attendees are. I think they can see because they're filling it out.
Oh, okay, great.
We can see that. So we have 11 of 12 people. So, or 11 of 12 people. So that's not bad. So here's the most people are interested in becoming coaches or looking for coach with some training, and then a couple of people that are curious, and one person that's L&D. So there you go. We can share that result if you want, but it's probably more for our knowledge than yours. So we'll try to answer questions at the different levels that you're at and see if we can hopefully help you. And of course, there'll be time for questions. If you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat, and I'll pause at various points just to give you an opportunity. And at the end, when we talk about case studies, what I'm really hopeful for is you'll have some examples in your mind of what you think might be possible grow-related things. So the first thing we need to make sure that we just lay out is that coaching happens on a spectrum. So what's known as traditional coaching, or what many people who are beginning their coaching journey know about, is what would be on the coaching spectrum much more skills or performance-based coaching. So when you think about a sports coach, actually you're thinking about somebody who is helping you develop or acquire skills in order to play golf better, tennis, swim, whatever sport it is that you have. They're there to improve your performance, motivate you, and even give you access to skills that you need to know. So when it comes to the coaching spectrum professionally, and internally within organizations, there are a lot of coaches. In fact, the bulk of coaches have skills at this end of the coaching spectrum, where they're able to help people develop skills, and if they have skills, help them to increase their level of performance, either moving to a higher level of performance. So in an organization that might be being promoted, or moving to a larger organization or a more demanding role, or dealing with a larger territory or a larger remit. And this is important to emphasize because as we talk about the the GROW model is most effective and was really developed with performance in view. So as we move further down the coaching spectrum toward development and transformation, the GROW model begins to lose its efficacy because the complexity of developmental and transformational change doesn't quite fit into what's great about the GROW model is that it's simple and intuitive. And this will make hopefully more sense as we move along. So essentially, at the front end of the coaching spectrum, the GROW model is quite effective. But as we move into development of competency, development of the capacity, development of long-term capability, and shift into transformation, where people are making meaningful changes to how they make sense of the world, making shifts in what they believe and value and how that shows up in their behavior, then the GROW model becomes less and less useful. Still a nice structure, but actually if you're using GROW coaching at the transformational level, it would require probably a lot more than the GROW model offers. But for us, it's a great, great place to start. And it is the beginning of all the coaching journeys that most people have as they train. So a little history on this is one of the grandfathers of the coaching movement, Sir John Whitmore, is the one who popularized the GROW model in his book, Coaching for Performance. And of course, we want to make sure we honor those who have done work in the coaching profession. So Graham Alexander and Alan Fine were also a part of that journey in the beginning of that movement. So this is a model that's been around for quite a long time. It's super well known, and most coach training programs around the world will teach it in some form, or some have reworked it and called it other things, but in the end, it's very similar to the GROW model. It's intuitive. It's very memorable. It's a tactical tool. We use it a lot with managers and leaders in organizations who are learning coaching skills. It's very transferable because it's so intuitive, and it's really quite applicable, particularly in tactical situations. So this is why it's well known. It's also well known because grow is a good word for what happens when we coach. People want to grow and develop. So it fits really nicely. And it's really tough to come up with a better almost acronym than GROW. So here's a brief overview of how this really works and looks. So the GROW model, we have these letters that start the words: goal, reality, options, a wrap up, or will do, or way forward. And that's the one that there's more disagreement on. So essentially, this is an exceedingly simple and useful tool for structuring a coaching conversation, for structuring a coaching program over time. So essentially, what we're really doing is starting with what is it that people want to achieve, the goal. So beginning with that end in mind. And skillful coaching means we have a program goal. So 10 sessions from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, what's the goal of the coaching? It's one of the ways that coaching is different than many other engagements because there is this very strong goal orientation to coaching. So at the end of this coaching session, what do you want to leave with is a question that leads to something like a goal. So it's where we want to be, and it's not where we are now. So a goal is outside of ourselves, and it requires movement, growth, change, development, action in order to get there. Reality is, again, very simply, just where we are now. So goal is where we want to be, and reality is what is the place that we're in. Now, that can be very, very simple, but it can also be very, very complex. So there's lots of layers to that. So for example, if my goal is to lead my team to a higher level of performance, it's not a bad goal. We would do a lot of work with that to refine it, but let's just say that's the goal, to lead my team to a higher level of performance. So if we look at reality, we would want to know, well, what's the level of performance that your team is now? What's the expectations for your team? What are the challenges that your team faces? How capable and skilled is your team at meeting those challenges or achieving those targets that have been allocated? And also, what about you as a team leader? Have you been a team leader for long? What do you know about team leadership? Have you led teams successfully before and this is a failing team? Were they performing previously and they've lost performance? Are they a new team? So all of these questions help us to understand the reality, the context under which that goal needs to take place. And options is really about what are some ways of getting from where we are to where we want to be. And that's really key. What are some creative, thoughtful, different, challenging, effective ways that we could possibly move from where we are to where we want to be? And this could be any range of things, but they need to be connected to the reality, and they need to make a definite connection toward the goal that our client wants to achieve. So we want to explore what are some options for getting from the reality closer to your goal or achieving your goal. And often those are larger items. So learn to be a team, assess my team members, develop more capability, build relationships with my team members, manage upwards differently so the targets aren't such a big stretch, whatever that happens to be. Then the wrap-up becomes the very specific action steps that people can take in order to get there. So the client and coaching, we're partnering, right? So we partner with our client to generate a list of options, and then we partner with our client to select an option or more than one. And then we also partner with our client to help them design actions to figure out what are the best steps that they can take to get from from where they are to the next place. So what are the next steps? So take each of my team members out for lunch. Do a survey. Clarify responsibilities and roles on the team. Learn about team leadership. Whatever it is that that individual needs to do is the next step. So one of the promises we made when we advertised this webinar was that we would explain the GROW models simply. So my question to you now, and feel free to just unmute yourself or ask a question in the chat, would be just to say, what questions do you have about this model or observations or thoughts before we move on? Something has happened in the chat. Ah, that's Sam being wonderfully helpful. Thank you. So I've either explained it so simply and clearly that it makes perfect sense and there's no questions, or I've put everyone to sleep and no one is here anymore.
Sorry, Craig, you've woken me up.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
A question that, as you say, Grow's been around a long time and it's obviously very successful. Where do you see it in examples of being really effective and actually where it's quite difficult to use? If I'm not asking too early, I'm just intrigued on the success of it, but how do you best work them in?
Rob, I'm going to say a little bit later we'll do some case study work around it. We'll talk about some cases. So we'll talk about cases where it works, and I think that's great. And we might even have someone come up with their own goals and walk through that. But yeah, we'll definitely look at that. I would say right now, from a basic perspective, a very tactical, less complex emotional type of movement that people want to make, goals, it's more effective. So I need to finish this project. I need to commit to, hit my sales target by the end of the month, and develop a week-by-week plan that's supported by a coach. So those kind of much more tactical type of things it tends to be much more effective with. Things that people want to change, like I judge people, and I'm a bit biased, and my workplace is becoming more diverse and inclusive, and I need to change the way I think about people of different races or ethno-linguistic backgrounds. That's the spot where it's a lot harder to have it, because it's just not as simple of a goal, and the reality has so many layers of complexity to it. The options aren't always apparent. I don't know what I can do. How do I change the way I've thought my whole life? And then the actions also aren't always like so sequential and so tactical. So does that give you an idea?
Yeah, no, it backs up what I've learned and what I've been doing with it. I kind of use, my words are project-based. It's kind of got an outcome you want to get to, and it helps you guide you through it with the types of questions and framework.
Yeah, definitely. Project-based is a good description. That's what we call tactical skill or performance in that sort of end of the coaching spectrum, for sure. And actually, we use this a lot with managers who are training to coach in organizations. The uptake is quite strong because part of the manager's role is to actually have this kind of conversation, and it gives them a set of tools. Two other questions quickly. Tran, when we get further information about reality, they will have a different goal versus the original one. Does this case happen? Always. In fact, if you explore reality well, the goal should change in most cases. So definitely we would say that we would expect it to change. If it's a tactical type of goal, it may not change, but the wording, the energy, the motivation, the meaning of the goal will change. And that's partly, quite useful. And we have some different processes we use. We have a process, what I won't go into here, called problem, remedy, outcome, goal, which is how we take what we call the offer from clients and help to transition it. And then we have, and that's all part of a larger, well-formed goal process, which is a key differentiator of our coach trainings. We spend a lot of significant depth around creating high resolution goals that are deeply rooted in someone's emotional, motivational, and cognitive and attentional balance. And again, that's a subject for another webinar. And Nathan Ho, if you could, Craig, would you add a new letter or change a word or letter to adapt your coaching in today's world? And you're one of those people that I love, Nathan, because that leads to the next slide, which is additions. So people have added, in order to help this be more effective, they've added topic to it. So it becomes grow. So the idea is that we don't just jump straight to the goal, because most people don't think that way. but we would actually add the idea of a topic to that particular goal, and then the model, and there's some processes that we work with, and then also some people have changed it to growl and added this learn love on the end of it. And our point of view on coaching is that coaching is not only about achieving goals. In fact, it's much more about learning the conditions under which you achieve goals and learning from the process so that you become a much more self-regulated, self-originating, and ultimately a self-transforming type of person. But I'd be curious, Nathan, if I can throw the question back at you. I don't know if either of these additions actually fit with today's world. So is there anything in your mind that you're thinking that might make it fit more this sort of today's world idea?
Thanks a lot, Craig. It was good to know these things. And I swear I did not, to everyone else, I did not know the slide afterwards is going to go on additions. I think just the prevalence of technology, the way we communicate with each other is so different than it was in, let's say, the early 90s when this was first, created. So technology, the way we communicate, the way we live in society is much more of, let's say, a digital virtual world as we are right now. How has that impacted the way I think it impacts the way we see the world, but has it any impact on the GROW model and how it's been applied and the efficacy of it today as it was maybe back 30 years ago?
Wow, that was 30 years ago. Definitely, good question, Nathan. Well, interestingly, people that are attempting to develop AI around coaching are using a model like the GROW model because of its simplicity to create questions. So because it's a very structured process, the coaching bot applications actually are quite, use this quite a lot, actually, this sort of very simple process of being able to say, what do you want to talk about today? And that's a topic, and then the person says something, and then the algorithm then just, would generate a goal question until there's enough words that are the goal type of words, and then it would move beyond that. So it's being used in that context. How coaching, and this is again why GROW is, we'd say, very simple in its perspective, is it can be so simple that the complexity of the world, the uncertainty, the amount of change that we have, as Sam mentioned, part of our solutions are designed for this VUCA, volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, complex world that we're in. And GROW is not as well suited to deal with the multiple layers of that and the complexity. So in the wrong hands or in unskillful hands, that people wouldn't be able to let go of it enough to modify. And I think it comes back to my answer to Rob's question as well, is as we get into these very deep goals around how do I transform my bias? How do I develop a different relationship with technology? Basically everything that's worked for the last 20 years, I know it's not working anymore. I need to change the way I lead, the way I live, the way I do everything. It's not, if you say I need to change who I am, it grows very difficult. It's just, it's a bit hard. So people have been trying, but we've developed sort of a process. We teach this early on in our coach training, and then we say to people, it's like the scale of, if you're learning music, it's a scale. It gives you that dun, 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 dun sort of thing. And can be a bit clunky and it doesn't sound like music, but it is the beginning of something. And then, of course, as you become much more skillful, then as a really skillful musician, you don't notice the scale anymore because they're doing all kinds of different things around it. Is the scale still there? Yes. It's important. But actually, we're able to do a whole bunch of different things with music. Dissonance, resonance, different types of notes, fifths and sevenths, all kinds of things we can play around with. But we have that basic sort of scale underneath it. But we'd be delighted if you have any ideas, Nathan, of what would be a good, different kind of thing to add to it. All right. So then let's begin to talk about how we apply this. And there's really, honestly, not much more to the slide presentation because of confidentiality. I haven't put a lot of detail here. But what I'd love to do is just stop that share and have a little bit more of a conversation around this. And I'd love for one of you, if you're willing to share, a goal or an idea of something you'd like to learn or develop or change. And then I'm happy to extrapolate how that might work through the GROW model. And if no one does that, then I'll give an example. But it might be more fun if one of you actually had something on your mind that you're thinking about. Let's refresh my water while I wait for someone to be brave or foolish. Right, so we're not getting anything, which is always the risk when we're making this happen, and that's okay. So let me just take something relatively common in terms of the kinds of things that people want to do differently. And what I'd like to do is I'll use a relational context as the goal, because it'll transfer both for people that coach in workplaces and people that coach people for more the domain of a business to consumer direct coaching or potentially life coaching. So one of the things that very often people want to change is how they relate to people. And very often there's issues that come up in relationships. And if you want to type in an issue that you think people have, I'm happy to work with that. If not, I'll use a case that's in my mind already, but I'm happy to make it a little bit more interactive if we can. And if anybody wants to throw something out there, I'm happy to work with that. And this is the thing about coaching, is in coaching, we don't know where things are going. So it's not predictable what our client will come up with. But in the absence of a suggestion, I'll happily say that one of the challenges that very often people have is just how they deal with conflict. So this can take any number of layers. But very often when a client comes to us, they actually don't know what they need to change in order to achieve the outcome that they want to achieve. So a recent conversation I had that was a coaching conversation, and I'll kind of generalize all this to not violate confidentiality, is someone was just not sure what to do when they felt like things were not going right in their relationship. So there was something wrong, and they didn't know how to bring up the topic or discuss it with someone else. So again, that's this idea. It's what we would call a problem. It's something I I have that I don't want? The problem is something's wrong in the relationship. And then second problem is I don't know how to handle it. So whether it's a work relationship or a personal relationship or a parenting relationship, there's always those sort of dynamics at play. So again, we don't know what the goal is yet. We just have this idea that something's not right and I don't know what to do. So the challenge for the coach at this stage of the conversation is to help the client articulate what it is that they'd like to be different. So what do I want to change? Do I want to change the fact that something's not right, or do I want to change the fact that I don't know what to do? So what would you like instead of what you have? And this is again helping the client to shift their mind away from their problem and more on what it is that they want that's in the future. So that's that movement toward goal. And we're beginning to shift the attention of the client away from what they don't want and more on what do I want instead of what I have. And this is the beginning of skillful coaching. So what's the goal? The person might say, well, I'd like to know how to act in that situation, or I'd like to be able to bring the topic up when I first hear this, that kind of thing. So the idea is that this individual would need to now figure out, do I want to learn the skill? My goal is to learn the skill, or my goal is to be comfortable with this lack of comfort in the relationship, or is my goal to fix it in some way? So as our clients are moving toward this conversation, now we're still in the goal phase, and in our point of view, we would see this as absolutely essential. Now, very often coaches move quite quickly to actions that people can take or wrap up. But we really challenge our coaches to become quite skillful at staying with what is it that the client wants, and how can we help them figure out what that is and begin to make movement toward it. So that's the real key here. So now we have this idea of a few things, but the only way we're really going to figure out what this person really wants is to explore reality, to find out what's really happening, how much do they know how to do it and they don't do it. So is the goal to be courageous enough, or do they not have the skills and they need to learn the skills, or they're too worried about it, or it's a high risk relationship and they have the skills in a lower risk relationship. So the understanding all that helps to refine the goal. And again, this is the challenge with the goal model, because it would be nice if people thought in goals, but most people don't. People that have been coached a lot will think in goals sometimes, but in general, people tend to come with either problems, remedies or solutions to their problems, or outcomes, things they want instead of what they have. But very often they don't come with this sense of what I need to achieve in order to change this situation is actually, I need to come up with this goal. So this is where people don't always cooperate with us and do it in the sequence that we'd like. But so then you're kind of flipping back and forth between goal and reality to find out what it is that they actually want. Now let's say that this person actually, and we'll do this in two ways. One is, let's say that what they say they need to do is they want to be more skillful at managing conflicts. They want to know how to handle that conversation. They just don't know how to do that. So that's the reality. I don't know how to do it. So then what is the goal would be to acquire that knowledge or acquire that skill. So that's the idea of that of reality leading us to a goal. And now when we're at the options phase, we're now beginning to look at, so based on where you are and the fact that your goal is to acquire and develop those skills, how are you going to do that? What are some of your options for doing that? And as in a case study, of course, we're going to work with the client around this. We're going to work with them around generating creative, challenging, interesting options that they're motivated to take that fit their reality, but also that challenge them to develop as a person. And again, and this is where it becomes, fairly not formulaic, but once they come up with some options, then we're going to have them help them to select the options, develop a criteria, and then choose their action and hopefully take it. So that's the grow model in that kind of process if they choose to acquire a skill. Now, if we shift the conversation slightly in this case study idea example that I'm walking you through, if instead of them needing to obtain and acquire the skill, actually what they need to do is be courageous, be brave. And it's fear that's getting in the way of their conversation. This is, again, where we have to be careful with this, because fear, again, what's my goal around this? Is my goal not to be afraid of confrontation? Or is my goal to not have my fear get in the way of my ability to have the conversation I need to have? Or do I want to learn to press through that fear and have a different mind about confrontation or conflict? So again, the complexity begins to shift when we move away from something that's skill acquisition or performance and move into this much more idea of I want to develop the ability to be more comfortable with conflict. And if that becomes the goal, and let's say that it does, then again, I want to develop the ability to be more comfortable with conflict becomes the goal. The options become less formulaic, because the path to change isn't about just learning something, practicing it, and seeing how it goes. It actually is, I need to work on myself in some way. So how do I do things that are difficult? What level of comfort am I aiming at? It just becomes a bit messier. But the grow model can still work. It just becomes a little bit more complex. And in the first example that I gave, where someone was going to acquire the skills, the interesting thing is that you might take them through a whole process where they acquire skills, but they discover later that they actually lack the courage to have the conversation that they need to have to resolve the conflict. So we come back to that similar idea of courage being part of that issue, and you might end up with dealing with a much more complex issue of how do I do things that I find I'm afraid of in service of my own happiness or my own well-being or getting things done that are more effective. So there you go. That's a case study sort of example of how you might apply the GROW model in a context around someone who's in relationship and needs to have challenging conversations in some way. So that's my example, and our plan certainly is to not talk for a whole hour. But we would certainly love to have you, what are your questions? What are the questions you came with about the GROW model and were they answered? What's coming up for you as I've walked you through this relatively simple, hopefully simple explanation of this very key and historical model. So what are your thoughts? I'd love to have some level of engagement. Feel free to enter. Yeah, thanks, Rob. I see you unmuting yourself.
I'm trying to develop myself up to not get caught with giving answers. And
Okay.
sometimes in GA it's quite frustrating because you want to give advice and stuff, and it's really about that listening and that deep listening and active questions. Even with the grow model, do you find yourself, or can you find yourself actually helping people get where they want by going a bit further at times, or are there boundaries that you draw through those areas?
Well, definitely the practice of professional coaching at an accredited level is that there is the absence of leading, advice giving, or dropping into other roles. On any coach's learning journey, there's a whole period of time where they struggle with that, and that can last for quite a while. And some very, very senior coaches tend to find themselves, again, being more skillful with the times when they want to give advice, they want to overhelp, and what's the best way for me to shift that. When you're working with people, particularly around skill acquisition and performance, it could be that your ideas might be quite useful for that particular, client. The challenge is how do you give those in a way that does not violate the coaching relationship, but also doesn't take away any ownership, accountability, and responsibility from the client. So I guess for me, the value of ownership, accountability, and responsibility and self-efficacy of my client is more important to me than my need to help or my need to, give them my perspective. Though we would definitely train people on how to do what we call non-invasive, put things on a table in a non-invasive way. So one of the ways that I do that is I would say, some of my clients have found some things useful. Would you like me to share those things? And now I can share one or two things that my clients have done. So it's not my idea, it's my client idea. It's my client's experience. But also I put those on the table in a way that's non-invasive. So I just say, here's thing one, here's thing two. And I don't say choose one. I would say, does that give you any ideas around what you could do? So again, I'm using that middle ground to just lay a couple of things down and not say choose one, but does that give you any ideas on what you could do? So you're always expanding your mind to think about that. Does that help at all, Rob?
It feels very similar to what I'm trying to do and
cool.
work on, because I got very early in my career, I got caught between mentoring and messing people's heads up unintentionally, or maybe intentionally actually. So yeah, it's just that position sometimes, helping people get to their answer but not give too much away, or do it in a manner that it's just stimulates further thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. So the big difference is moving them towards your answer versus moving them towards their answer. Exactly. And that's hard for learning coaches. Thank you. A couple other questions have come in. Let me just get these. So Triad has asked, how do I identify and grab the real client's issue or / problem? This is really challenging, Triad, because this is where that exploration of goal and reality, and in some ways even topic, is really key. And that's why sequentially, because people, we're messy. I always say to our coaches, people don't know what they want. Even when they think they know what they want, they probably don't want that. They actually want something else. So we really have to help them. And also, we have to understand that coaching is a learning journey. And part of our point of view is that just because you don't know what you want, you might take action in the direction of something you think you want, and through that, either learn you don't want it, or learn you want a different version of it. So when you're moving toward where you think you want to go, as you move closer to that, the view changes. So very often clients will choose things that I don't think are good ideas. And then they learn it's not a good idea, or they actually learn it was a good idea. So I don't necessarily have to identify and grab the client's real issue, but I want the client to go through a process of discovery where they figure out what their real issue is. And that's kind of the key. But, and this is the other part, and it's a bit of counseling sort of thinking maybe in your question is we don't necessarily have to, and I work with coaches a lot around this, you don't need to get to the root of the problem in order for them to achieve their goal. So it's so much more about not figuring out what's wrong, but what do you want instead of that problem? And it could be that I need to heal something, and that might mean I need counseling. But in the same case of the conflict resolution example that I give, I might not know that my real issue is courage until I have no more excuses. I've learned the skills, I practiced it in some place, but I still cannot have this conversation with this individual because I'm afraid. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been on the journey with my coach. So that's kind of the difference, and hopefully that helps. A few more questions coming in. Triet, thank you for your thanks. Dariana, how do you face a straight question from your client that just tells you, help me, give me an idea, is this ethical? And Dariana is part of our coach training program right now online, so I'll tell you that you'll learn much more about this over time, and I'll give you an answer right now that works. And it depends on the level of your client's frustration and their degrees of empowerment. When we coach people that have low levels of empowerment, then they want answers, so they have to learn to generate answers themselves. And sometimes that's because they're lazy. Sometimes it's because they're not very creative. And sometimes it's just because they legitimately don't know. So then the idea is as a coach to not necessarily, if your client says, tell me what I should do, again, if you're a skillful coach, then what you want to do is come back to the whole idea of here's how coaching works. So I would say to my client who asked me that, so what coaching is about is helping you generate your own solutions, helping you have ideas and plans that are deeply meaningful to you, that you're connected to, that you're motivated to do. And if I told you what I would do, there's just one really big problem with that. You're not me. So what I'd love for you to do is come up with what you think might be possible for you. And again, and that's the case where as a coach, I might say, some of the things my clients in similar situations, or some people find it helpful if I haven't had a lot of clients, or if I've read articles or have some knowledge about it, I can say, here's what some experts say about this. What do you think? But that idea of just putting it in the middle without saying, here's what I think you should do with our finger pointing at them, then that's really where we're crossing the line. Being able to say, I'd much rather you come up with it. If you really don't have anything, then let's figure out this. And of course, again, there's layers to this. Is it unethical to give someone advice in a coaching session? No. In a general state, it's not unethical for me to say, I think it might be helpful if you did this. It's not a violation of ethics if it happens once, but if it's what we're doing constantly, then it's just not coaching. It's consulting or mentoring or leading or managing or some other expression. All right, a couple of more questions are there, and I'll answer those, and then I think our time will be up. How to develop questioning techniques, skills in coaching conversations? Well, as a person who trains coaches for a living, I would definitely say take proper coach training. If you haven't been trained as a coach, then it's very unlikely that what you're doing fits within the guidelines of what coaching is. Definitely, there's a couple of processes. One is you can learn good questions. So you can collect questions, you can find them, they're everywhere. There's books full of questions. So one way is to develop questions. Another way is to use models where, like a GROW model, where the questions fit the model. So what do you want to achieve is a goal question. Where are you now is a reality question. What are some ways you could get to where you want to go from where you are is an options question. What are you going to do next? Or what's your first step is a wrap-up question. And so you can use a pattern that will help you. But we would say, in our perspective, the biggest thing that's required for a coach to be skillful in questioning is a shift in their inner terrain, a transformation of the coach. So what stops me from giving advice isn't that I know more questions than you, it's that I don't think my advice is particularly useful to someone. And I'm deeply committed to helping someone else activate the greatness inside of them. So that shift in my way of being deals with my challenge. So develop questioning techniques and skills so many ways. Curiosity, patience, listening skills, diverse thinking patterns, not being locked into a particular solution, keeping an open mind, being able to zoom in, zoom out, all kinds of different things we do that enable us to be quite skillful. But I mean, I just say, even if you don't take coach training from us, I would definitely say the best place to learn coaching skills is from a properly skillful professional coach training organization, of which there's a bunch, and some that maybe have the credentials that don't necessarily aim for the quality, but you can learn through those situations. And then the last question from Nathan: do you have any suggestions on how to warm up clients prior to a session to get the most out of them? So Nathan, I'll just challenge your wording a bit. I don't want to get the most out of you. It's not my job to get the most out of you. But to get the most out of the conversation, to get the most value, how do I warm clients up? Definitely, we need a high level of trust, genuine curiosity, openness, sincere desire to see people achieve other than myself, are some of the ways of being. But honestly, we just warm people up like any other way. It's just, how are you doing? What's happening in your life? What's going on? What's happened since the last session? That kind of idea. So being genuinely interested and curious, and then focusing the conversation around their agenda and what they want. When people learn that it's really about them, then there's this openness and shift in their demeanor. And when that's really true, then very often the most powerful movement and work can happen. So with all that, it's 8:30. Beautiful, challenging questions. You really made me work hard. I missed the coach whose client is 10, 15, 20 years their senior. If your client's a lot older than you, then my advice to you is just this: stick to coaching. You don't have experience that you can share or whatever, just help them to figure out what they need and what they want. They still have goals, they still have reality. Your expertise is in your ability to help people change and make progress toward what they care about, to figure that out. So help them to get clarity on that. And if they're more experienced, have more expertise, more knowledge than you, it doesn't really matter, because you should be an expert in helping people figure out what they want, activate resources that help them to move from where they are to where that is, and be skillful in that journey. So there, a quick answer. It's 8:31. I am going to say hello to my wife and say goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much. As Sam mentioned earlier, we'd love to have you contact us. That information is there for you. Of course, we'll follow up with you, and hopefully we can journey with you. So thank you so much for being here, your good questions and your interaction. And we'll see you next month at another one, or maybe at some other event that we do. Thank you for your kindness and your attendance.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to speaking to you guys. So please contact us for any question. It doesn't have to be about the GROW model. We do a bunch of things related to coaching for people who want to become coaches, but also who want to bring this into their teams and organizations. So connect with us.